Happy Sunday. Get connected in here. So start seated. Seated seems like a good place to begin today. I think we'll slow things down pretty significantly. Just a nice tall seat. Let the eyes close if that feels comfortable for you. Let your breath start to smooth out. Feel the softening of the shoulders. The breath cycle deepens. So think about softening those edges of the inhale and the edges of the exhale just a little bit more. So that there's this fluid rolling exchange between the parts of the cycle of breath. And we'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds here. And when it feels right, let's allow the eyes to softly blink open. We'll receive some light. Broaden across the collarbone a little bit. So a little intentional width here, maybe even palms down to help make that happen. Let's turn our gaze over towards the right. And as we do that, make sure the left shoulder pulls back even more intently. And then let's relax back to neutral. And we'll do the same thing over to the left. So a big full rotation here. Make sure that right shoulder pulls back really intently. Point of emphasis and awareness. And let's come back to neutral. And with an exhale, allow your chin to just tuck down to the sternum. And as the chin settles into its full tuck here, think about pulling across the shoulder girdle and bringing some width there. And so as the shoulder heads get a little bit further apart, we maybe start to feel some sensation of that lateral chain tying in between the torso and cervical spine. See if you can relax that just with the exhale breath. And let's bring our head back to neutral. And really make sure that you get the head far enough back that it stacks on the spinal column. And let's let the eyes close once again. Turn the palms up if they're down, and then give a subtle little lift to the chin. And draw your breath right into the middle of the sternum. And then let your awareness drift to the center of the forehead. Breath to the middle of the sternum, awareness to the center of the forehead. And we're going to give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And as you're right and you're ready, chin comes back to neutral, eyes can open. Let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. And actually, before we get too set up there, let's take our blanket or towel and place that underneath the knees. So just a little softness. You do not need to do this, but a little softness so that we can spend a little bit more time here without the knees becoming a potential problem. And then let's exhale and sink the seat back to the heels. Keep the hands planted and try to keep the arms active. So we end up with some strength across the shoulder girdle. And then inhale, pull yourself to tabletop. Exhale, we're going to sink back once again, heels or seat to heels, trying to keep the arms active so there's still some strength across the shoulder girdle. And then inhale to tabletop. And let's just move with our breath here. So sinking back, arms staying active, shoulders staying involved, engaged. And then the inhale just pulling you back into that reset. Trying to find the same fluidity in the breath that we had at the beginning of practice, and trying to match the fluidity in the breath with the fluidity of the movement. And we'll give ourselves about 15 more seconds just to explore back and forth between these two shapes. Focus here is really across the shoulder girdle, which is pretty unique. To have our focus in between these two movements. The next time you settle back, we're going to settle back into a traditional child's pose. So letting the whole of the torso settle, letting the arms relax. And now the emphasis shifts more traditionally across the hip girdle. And we'll just slowly Breathe into this. And we'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds, just settling across the hips. And when you're right, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. And as you come back into that down dog space, this will be the most active shape we're going to get into today. Think about feeling into that activity across the shoulder girdle. And then set your hips far enough, deep enough into the shape that shoulder girdle gets a vertical expansion, which is running the length of the spinal column, right? So elongating in the direction of spinal column length. And then once you feel like you've maximized that potential depth, let's come back down to hands and knees. And from tabletop, we're going to drop the elbows so we end up half dolphin, half sphinx here. And then just, so keeping the elbows locked in and trying to keep the 90-degree bend at the elbow space. Sink your seat back. So as much effort in that elbow engagement as possible, just until you feel the lateral line start to expand. Right, and you can see I've gone past 90 degrees, right? But the effort is to keep that elbow bend at 90 degrees. And that really helps expand this shoulder girdle space down into the lateral reaches. And we'll give ourselves one last breath here. When you take your next inhale, let's just pull ourselves back into tabletop, and then we'll extend our legs in front of us for staff. Blanket now can come off of the mat. You can also tuck it underneath the tailbone for a little elevation and a little bit more ease in your staff pose, if that feels right. It does not need to be a part of the practice. With an inhale, let's bend our left knee. We're going to do a traditional twist here. So left hand's coming behind us, right elbow to that lateral edge of the left thigh, and then use the right elbow as some leverage to help bring the twist in. The left arm is just providing the stability, and the stability is providing the length. So we're making sure that that left arm is elevating the torso upwards, and then the right arm is helping to rotate the torso into the twist. And we'll relax back to neutral. The left leg's going to extend out in front of us, and we'll follow that forward into a fold. And so there was this time in this forest within this old hollowed out tree where a hatching happened. 3 little owl hatchlings emerged from their eggs. And their mother did a great job rearing them and feeding them. 3 owl hatchlings is a lot to take care of, but she managed to. When you're right, when you're ready, let's walk the spine back to vertical. We'll inhale and bend that right knee again. Traditional twist. Right hand comes behind us. Left hand to that lateral edge. Use the left elbow as the leverage to help rotate. Use the right arm as the leverage to help elevate the torso. Think about those two mechanisms: elevation of the spine, rotation of the spine. That is the two ingredients needed to make this a delicious recipe. And when you're right, when you're ready, when you're balanced, returning back to neutral, extending the right leg and following it forward into a fold. The fold here really becoming expansive, ideally expansive in the spine, but if you are being restricted in the hamstrings and you want to be restricted in the hamstrings, sure. If you don't and you want to move that up into the spine, remember you can bend the knees and shift that expansion point into the torso. And we're going to give ourselves 20 more seconds here. And when you're right, when you're ready, we'll walk ourselves back in the seat. Let's take both knees and bend them, and then allow the bottoms of the feet to come together. Knees fall out wide. Take the hands to the ankles, so 4 fingers wrapping around the front of the ankles, and then pull the heels back towards you. And as you pull the heels back towards you, what we're looking to do is really allow that space to bring the sternum forward and get the spine as tall as possible. And then let's let the eyes close and give ourselves that same subtle chin lift that we did early on in class from our seated shape. This time we have a little bit more strength involved, right? We're not just sitting on the structural stack of the spinal column, we're holding that positioning. Even so, see if you can get the shoulders to relax. The arms are going to have to work a little bit, but can we have the arms active and the shoulders finding their way towards ease? And this is just going to be 15 more seconds here. I know this is a big active ask, especially for a recharge. And when you're right, when you're ready, let's extend our legs back out in front of us, and we will engage with at least one of our props, the pillow bolster. Maybe more though. So we're going to take our pillow bolster on top of the lap here. So finding a stack that can be supportive, and that can be both props combined. Remember, you can fold the pillow, you can fold the blanket, and we can get as high as feels comfortable. And then we're looking to rest our forehead so that we're really focusing the fold here high in the thoracic spine into flexion and into the cervical spine. And so obviously this can be at the height of your choice, right? At the height of your prop capacity, really. But it should feel good. It should feel relatively easy, even while we're getting this big and significant and impactful upper back bend. So these 3 little owls grow up and they get to the point where they're starting to spread those wings, where it almost feels like they can take flight. And in fact, 2 of them do. 2 of the 3 owls are able to leave the nest, and they do a small little circle. And it is at that point their mother comes back and she tells them they need to go immediately. And they, of course, all three ask why, and they're told there's a fire coming and they need to leave the nest. The two owls that have flown immediately take flight. And the third was just a little bit bigger, a little bit more robust in the body, but a little bit less sure in the wings, flaps and falls to the forest floor. And our mother comes rushing down, but she's caught up in the first flames of this rapidly spreading forest fire, and it burns her face. Our mother's still able to pick her up, and they all four owls fly to safety. One of the three chicks being held in the mother's beak. Last 45 seconds here. They eventually make their way to the safety of a new hollowed out tree right next to a wetlands where they'll be safe from the fire. And the mother puts all three back into what will become a new nest. But there's a separation in the engagement between the chicks. The two chicks that are able to fly completely ignore this third chick now that has this disfigurement from the flames of the fire. And when you're ready, let's bring ourselves back up nice and vertical. Let's take our blanket and from shelf full, just go hot dog once. So we end up with a nice solid rectangle. And we're going to place that so that the bottom edge, so glute side of the blanket, is low enough that the top edge can hit the bottom edge of our shoulder blade. So that was the most convoluted way to describe that possible. When we lay down, we want the shoulder blades to be on the mat, and we want the thoracic, the middle of the thoracic, to be lifted. So we're laying down, shoulder blades are lower than the middle of the spine, and that's really the key. It's a reversing of the shape we were just in. And if it feels like it's too much, because this is a lot, right? We went from really deep thoracic flexion, and now we're going to thoracic extension and thoracic neutrality. So if it feels like it's too much, just pull the blanket out and go to traditional body resting against the mat. Just this nice middle of the body release is what we're looking for. So if the elevation isn't helping, let it go. And so the next time that this mother owl flies out, the two more capable, more airborne chicks push the third out of the nest. And this third little owl again falls to the forest floor, this time landing in this soft, mushy wetlands. and she observes the space around her. And there just happens to be this little owl mask. Some child must have left it behind. And it's just her size. It has this little elastic band. And she slips it over her face. And she's now wearing this wood carved, yeah, we'll say it's wood carved owl mask. And it's clearly a children's toy, but it just happens to slide right over. And she starts to walk forward in the wetlands and immediately meets a frog. And the two of them have this conversation. The frog is quite shocked to see an owl walking along. Doesn't mention the mask at all. Last 15 seconds here. And so quite quickly, the owl and this little frog become friends. And the frog kind of takes the owl around this wetland swamp area and introduces her to everyone. When you're ready, let's bring our knees into a bent position. Lift the belt line high enough to slide our prop out from underneath us. And let's put that to the side for a moment. Then release your tailbone back down to the mat. As the tailbone comes back down to the mat, we just settle here. If you've already had the blanket removed and your body feels perfectly ready, you can just go bottoms of the feet together, knees out wide for a little medial line expansion. If it feels better to just let the spine integrate, then just breathe into that for about another 30 seconds. And then eventually we're going to bring our knees together, kneecaps point towards the ceiling, and knees into a bent position. And let's let both legs fall over to the left. And we're just going to press ourselves up with our right hand back towards seat. When you do so, give yourself this little bit of a twist so that you can observe the back of the room or the back of the space behind you. And then we'll walk ourselves into kind of a traditional seat. Legs can stay bent if that's accessible to you. You can also extend the legs. We're going to take the bolster and slide that behind us, bolster or blanket, or excuse me, blanket slash pillow, right? If you don't have a bolster, an extended pillow with an extended folded hot dog blanket would be ideal, right? So just stacking those two so we get a little bit of height. And then we're going to take the knees and let them fall over to the right. And as we do that, right hand's going to come over to the left side. And we're going to walk ourselves so that the middle of the sternum can come down on this prop. So again, this can be a pillow with a blanket stack. It could be just a pillow. It could be just a blanket. It can be a bolster. Anything that provides a little bit of support here. And then head just rest either forehead down, one ear down. Really make the determination as to which direction the pointing of your chin will provide the most benefit for you. And so this little owl is going around the swamp being introduced to everyone, and she's starting to feel the weight of this mask she's put on. But as the frog takes her kind of animal to animal, no one ever mentions the mask. And she's been scarred, or at least she has this memory of the way that her siblings had treated her with the mask removed and the burn apparent. So no matter how heavy the weight of the mask feels, she doesn't even consider removing it. If you can find your way back into the smoothness of the exchange between the inhale and the exhale as you settle further and further into this twist. When it feels right for you, let's bring our hands down to the mat. We'll lift ourselves up and give yourself that same little ability to gaze to the back of your room that you did on the opposite side. And then we're going to bring ourselves back to neutral, and the knees will fall over to the left. As the knees fall over to the left, left hand comes over to the right side of the mat. We'll take the supported twist side too. So just right back onto our prop. Just settling into that prop space. Breathing with ease and fluidity. softening that transition between the two breath cycles, really maintaining that focus on softening that transition so that even though we have the spine about as twisted as it can be, the breath feels good and natural. The breath feels at ease. And so back at the owl's nest, the mother is frantically searching for her missing third chick. And she's questioning the two remaining, and they're not saying anything. And she starts doing circles, expanding circles out from the new nest to find her missing chick. And the trouble is, this chick is, underneath these grass archways, roaming the world of the swamp floor with her guide, this frog. And she's meeting snakes and fish, salamanders. And everyone is just so gracious and so kind towards her that she's almost forgotten the world of normal owldom. That night, the frog makes her this little bed under this grass canopy. And she lies down, and as she's lying down, her wing bumps up against this wooden mask that she's almost forgotten she's wearing. And she thinks about taking it off. Obviously, it'd be more comfortable to sleep without it, she thinks. But the kindness she's experienced while wearing this mask tell her, she tells herself that it wouldn't be worth the exchange. If anyone saw what she is underneath the mask, they would treat her differently. And so she goes to sleep wearing this wooden mask. We have about 60 more seconds here on the second side of this supported twist. Drift the awareness back to smoothing out the transitions of breath. And when you are right, we are just going to roll that prop or push that prop out from underneath us. We'll set that to the side. Let's set that to the top. And then we're working straight down to the belly and into crocodile pose. So hands stacked, forehead resting on those stacked hands. And so we're back into kind of a full spinal column extension. The bend is very gentle. We want our breath to be just as fluid and just as easy as it was in the twist. But we're also now really thinking about finding symmetry in the shoulder placement, the hip placement, femur placement. Really tibia, fibia down to the calcaneus bone, the heels. We want the entirety of the body to be symmetrical here. And so crocodile, which so often is an opportunity to rest and find ease, we're really using this shape here as a realignment with subtle extension in the spine. Really thinking about realigning the body here while being prone. And then bring your awareness across the shoulder girdle like we did in the first third of class and think about broadening out. So hands are stacked, but we're just taking that little bit of extra width, little bit of musculature engagement into width here. And as that happens, there's a little bit more room for the sternum to move forward. And as the sternum moves forward, see if you can find more breath. And what's nice about being prone as the breath expands is we really get to feel more of that. So you're getting the feedback from the floor and mat into each breath cycle. And then when you're right, when you're ready, we're just going to roll straight over onto our backs, whichever direction feels most appropriate to make that transition, and end up with our knees bent. We'll start a little dynamic sway of the knees here, lateral movement left to right. And with that lateral sway, we find ease and fluidity in the movement, trying to match what we've created in the breath. And then the next time the knees fall over towards the left, let's let them stay there, a little static. Twist from the lower half of the body now to match how much we've done with this upper body rotation. try to soften here because we have a lot of twist capacity. Instead of trying to force and push into the corners, see what you can do to become more jello-like in this twist. So that the entirety of your body, while rotated, is at ease, relaxed, and free. And we're going to be here for about 50 more seconds. When you're right, when you're ready, let's bring our knees back to neutral. We'll push down into the toe mounds and heels, lift up into that little resetting bridge. Release the tailbone back down to the mat and exhale and let the knees fall over to the second side. The next morning, the owl and the frog wake up, still wearing her mask. She makes her way out into the sunshine. And she spreads her wings and she flaps as hard as she can. And she, of course, doesn't go anywhere. But it's the flapping of the wings that catches the attention of the mother owl. And she sees her little third baby and she swoops down. She lands right next to her. And the little baby's like, the little chick is really excited to see her mother. And she introduces her to all the friends she's met in the swamp. Last 40 seconds here on this second side. And when you're right, when you're ready, knees come back to neutral. Press down in the toe mounds and heels. Lift yourself into that last little bridge. Ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need as you release the tailbone back down. And as you land, if there's anything that would be beneficial, offer it. If you feel open and free and ready for Shavasana, just melt into that space. If there's movement required, offer that. Eventually, we'll find our way into some stillness. And so this little owl introduces her mother owl and to all of her new friends. And it's a really wonderful exchange. And finally, a mother owl says, it's time to go home. And she says, I need you to flap your wings like you've never flapped before. Let's take off and I'll lead you back to the nest. And the little owl starts flapping and flapping and flapping, but doesn't go anywhere. And when it feels right, you're just finding that perfect space of stillness. So after some struggle, the mother owl looks down at the little chick and she says, honey, you're gonna have to take off the mask. It's making you too heavy. And this little chick looks back up at her mother and she's like, no, because they have all only seen me in the mask. Honey, you're gonna have to take off the mask if you want to fly back to the nest. There's no choice. And all of the swamp friends are gathered around watching. And she slowly peels off the mask and sets it down, and almost like no one notices, no one changes a thing. She starts flapping her wings and she starts to lift off the ground, and all of her swamp friends start cheering and clapping for her. And her mother fly back to the nest. We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes, into our wrists and our ankles, elbows, knees, shoulders, hips, neck and head. Jaw, eyes, tongue, all moving until eventually we utilize that movement to transition from the shape we are in and bring ourselves back into a seat. And in this seated space, we find that fluidity of breath, stacking of the spine, let our eyes close. Feel into that space. And with your next inhale, we'll bring your hands together, heart center. And over the course of the next 7 days, can you ensure that any weight of the mask you may wear in public, the shifting of that public perception of you, isn't preventing you from soaring, and see how that impacts your experience? Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday. Love the heck out of you guys. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move. If not, we'll do this again next Sunday. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for being here. Mwah.